Good morning, members. It's the appointed time. We have a quorum. Both the chairperson and the deputy chair are otherwise engaged at the moment, so I'm standing in for the moment. Now, item number 1, information papers issued since the last meeting. No such paper has been issued since the last meeting. Item 2, items for discussion at the next meeting. Members, please refer to LC paper number CB bracket 3879/2024 bracket 01 and also bracket 02, and they are a list of outstanding items for discussion and the list of follow actions.
The next regular meeting will be held from 10:45 a.m. to 12:45 p.m. on the 13th of December. It's a Friday. The administration recommends the discussion on the following items. First, vessel subsidy scheme. Second, proposed installation of camera systems in all taxi compartments. Do members agree? All right, thank you. Separately, the panel on environmental affairs recommends that we hold a joint panel meeting from 4:30 to 5:45 p.m. on the 16th of December 2024. We will discuss the citywide green transformation roadmap for public buses and taxis. The Secretariat has issued a notice to members. Please take note of that. The meeting will be held on the 16th of December from 4:30 to 5:45 p.m. It's a Monday. After the meeting, LegCo members will have a meeting with District Council members. So that meeting will have to... So this meeting will have to finish at 10:30 a.m. today. Agenda item 3, 6101TX Universal Accessibility Program. Let's invite the government representatives to join us. There are 2 papers. LC paper number CB bracket 3879/2024 bracket 03, paper provided by the administration, and LC paper number CB bracket 3879/2024 bracket 04, background brief prepared by the LegCo Secretariat. Welcome, government officials. This item involves public works proposals. Members, please, in accordance with Rule 83A of the Rules of Procedures, disclose any direct or indirect pecuniary interests in relation to the item that we're going to discuss now. Members who would like to put questions to the administration, please press the Request to Speak button. We have a number of government representatives with us. Ms. Amy Wong, Deputy Secretary for Transport and Logistics. Ms. Gillian Lam, Principal Assistant Secretary for Transport and Logistics. Mr. Patrick Ng, Project Manager, Major Works of Highways Department. And Mr. Anthony Tung, Principal Project Coordinator, Universal Accessibility Highways Department. Ms. Wong, please. Thank you, Chairman. Together with the Highways Department, we would like to give members an update on the latest progress of the Universal Accessibility Program, and will brief members on the work plan of the government in 2025 to 2026. The government has been installing barrier-free access facilities at public walkways to benefit people in need as well as elderly people. We've rolled out the UA program since 2018. As at 2024, we have completed about 200 items, accounting for about 60% of all items. 166 items are under construction. There will be another 118 items that will be completed over the next 3 years. To speed up the different items and projects under the UA program, the Highways Department has been adopting different measures. For example, we are continuing to adopt the MIC construction method, and we are also stringently supervising the performance of contractors. Also, the Highways Department is rolling out different enhancement measures. We are optimizing the design of lifts to benefit wheelchair users. Also, we are implementing beautification works on the facade of lifts, and we're also trying to enhance the cleanliness of lifts and lift towers. To subsidize the relevant costs under the UA program, we expect that in the 2025 to 26 financial year, we will need $1,031.72 million. We hope to get the support of members. Now I invite colleagues from the Highways Department to give a more detailed briefing. Afterwards, we'll be happy to take members' questions. Thank you. Just now, the Deputy Secretary has given a briefing on the progress of the UA program. I'm not going to repeat the details here. Now I'd like to tell you about what measures we're going to adopt in enhancing our works and management. Since 2012, we have started to adopt the MIC construction method. This construction method can help us speed up works progress, and also it helps enhance safety as well as the quality of works. As we do the on-site assembly work in an off-site assembly yard, we can concurrently carry out other types of works. When the assembly is finished, we can move the assembled parts to the construction site, and we'll then just need another few months to complete all the works. So this helps speed up the progress. As mentioned, since 2012, we have started adopting the MIC construction methods. 53 walkways and 76 lifts see the adoption of MIC construction methods. We expect that before the end of this year, another 5 walkways and 7 lifts will see the adoption of this method. Moving forward, we will continue to adopt this construction method as we build lift and lift towers. Last year, at the panel meeting, we mentioned that some contractors performed poorly, and 7 contracts could not be completed because of this. We have already withdrawn the 9 project items, and we've included them into a new works contract awarded in August this year. We understand that there have been delays in these project items. So we have proactively considered the different proposals to speed up progress. For example, we try to increase manpower, and when appropriate, we adopt the MIC construction method. We're also trying to resequence the work processes. We believe that 2 out of these 9 items will be completed by Q3 next year, and the remaining 7 will be completed progressively between end of 2025 to 2026. Apart from adopting the MIC construction method in terms of maintenance as well as maintaining the cleanliness of lifts, we are introducing new elements. We have launched beautification works, and we want to share with you about this. On optimizing the design of lifts, we have introduced touchless buttons to enhance the hygiene. Also, we have used reflective panels and control panels to provide more convenience to wheelchair users so that they can easily turn around inside the lifts. This March, we completed the testing for nano self-cleaning coatings as well as nanofiber filters. We found that these two materials can help enhance the cleanliness of lifts and lift towers, and they help prevent dust and dirt accumulation. So we'll continue to adopt these materials. We also, when appropriate, implement beautification works. For example, last year at the footbridge number KF29 in Kowloon City, we invited a designer to help design the footbridge to showcase the unique historical and cultural aspects of the community. They include local delicacies and Kowloon walled city. And the footbridge has been very popular. Many people go take photos there. In terms of stakeholder engagement, we have been liaising with various relevant stakeholders, including the district councils and their committees, the relevant owners or parties responsible for the management of the concerned land and walkways. For example, this march together with HKCSS, we invited some NGOs, including those engaging in rehabilitation services and elderly groups. We've had many exchanges with these organizations, which help enhance our service quality. In year 2025 to 26, will require an estimated budget of $1,031.72 million. The expenditure will be charged to the block allocation subhead under Capital Works Reserve Fund Head 706 Highways. We hope to get members' support. Thank you. Thank you, Administration. 7 members have pressed the button. They are Mr. Stanley Lee, Mr. Scott Leung, Mr. Chen Xiu-hong, Mr. Chang Hop-fung, Mr. Yim Kong, Dr. Lo Wai-kwok, and Ms. Jovi Chen. This item will run until 9:30 a.m., so 4 minutes for each member, questions and answers inclusive. Please leave at least 1 to 2 minutes for the administration to answer your questions. Mr. Stanley Lee, please. Thank you, Chair. From the public's perspectives, this universal accessibility program is a good one. It's just like the $2 scheme. The government has been adopting the MIC construction method to build lifts. Does it help reduce the cost? And how much cost has been reduced? Also, a number of lifts have been built. Have you made an assessment on the utilization rate? Thirdly, this scheme has been launched for at least 10 years now. At the beginning, progress of works was slow. What is the works progress now? Thank you. Deputy Secretary, I thank Mr. Lee for his support. In terms of overall works progress, as mentioned in the opening remarks, we have adopted different proposals and methods, including the MIC construction method. It helps reduce construction time by 6 months after the adoption of MIC. We've also used different strategies. For example, we communicate with relevant stakeholders. We allow also contractors to take part in the projects early to help us reduce the construction time. As we continue to accumulate more experience, we will further speed up the works. In terms of the cost, currently we have 3 works contracts that see the adoption of MIC. In the first 2 projects, the cost was higher compared to traditional construction, but for the 3rd project, we see a significant reduction in construction cost. As contractors gain more experience in using MIC, the cost will be comparable to that in projects that use traditional construction methods.
On pedestrian flows, the point of this program is to make life easier for people in need in terms of mobility. We haven't done a detailed study for each lift in terms of the number of users. In deciding on the project, we do consult the district councils beforehand. We provide information such as potential number of users to the DCs so that those DCs can make an informed decision. Any follow-up from Mr. Stanley Lee? I got feedback about the lifts already put in place. We just heard about beautification works, but there's a point the government needs to note. People line up for the lifts. I did a visit with government staff. We need to keep order and make sure people are clear on where they enter and where they exit. If we can do that, that would be great. Mr. Scott Leung. The UA makes it easier for people to go around town. This is a good program. The program is working. I do have a few points I want to follow up on. Now, there are certain underperforming contractors that led to delays. 9 projects are plagued by delays. So SSP 01, SSP 02, Taihang Tong East Estate being one of them. They were supposed to be done by the 3rd quarter last year. They should be done by now. But delays mean the works won't be completed until the 1st quarter, 2026. Do we have any measures? Say, where possible, maybe we can use MIC to speed the works up. But what specific plans do we have that we may be discussing with the new contractor so that we can build faster and we have that completed earlier? This has dragged on for too long. The people living in those estates are older people. They need the lift. So are there ways for us to build faster? Now, for those particularly underperforming contractors, you have to find new contractors. So does that mean higher costs? Will there be penalties? Are we going to recover extra expenses from the underperforming contractors? We can't just let that slide. And how do we prevent that kind of thing from recurring? Say a contractor snaps up the contract with an artificially low cost, and then they do poorly. The ones who suffer are the residents or the department. So do we have plans for the future to prevent the recurrence of such problems? Now, on the way forward, we all agree that the UA program works. So given that, are there plans? Say, the Housing Bureau has the well-being design that's to improve linkages in the urban area. It's about linking up housing estates with the rest of the community. Take Cha On Estate. In Lee Chang Ok, there's a footbridge. Can we build a lift there? This may involve cross-departmental, cross-bureau tie-up to promote or extend the schemes to other communities as well. Deputy Secretary, I thank the member for his support. Now, on the performance of certain contractors, the contract covers 14 footbridges. 5 have been done. As for the 9 remaining, they're still ongoing. In August this year, we included those 9 projects under a new contract that we awarded. The work started. The Highways Department will work with the new contractor closely on those projects. New measures we can consider are increasing manpower. Where possible, we adopt MIC. sequencing the works processes and extending the work hours. We will strive to complete those projects as soon as we can. SSP01 and SSP02, which were mentioned by the member. The latest projection is to complete those projects by the first quarter of 2026. We will work with a new contractor on those projects as well. Now, on penalties, for this underperforming, or rather the contractor who underperformed, we will recover damages from this contractor for the delays. Those delays will not lead to extra expenses from the government. And we have also suspended this contractor from bidding for contracts for road works and sewage works. And we are also looking at downgrading this contractor in the tendering process. Mr. Chen Xiu-hong. As members say, the UA program is a great program. This makes life easier for people, especially for seniors and people with impaired mobility. The government has put in the effort. There were enhancements. There was more engagement with stakeholders early on, and also there were efforts to speed up the works. I welcome in particular the adoption of MIC. MIC came with many benefits, faster, safer, but I didn't quite catch a point about the cost. Around the time MIC was adopted, there were 5 contracts, 120 lifts. You need to standardize things before you get the economies of scale. Without standardization, no MIC. Now, we have already awarded several contracts involving more than 100 lifts since the adoption of MIC. Do we have any sense of how much savings we have? Is it 10%, 20% in terms of savings? Now, each project is unique, but can the government give us a sense of the savings on top of the fact that this is a great program and that people can access safer, better, and cheaper lift? Now, I also want to discuss the costs based on the paper and other information. Since 2012, the money granted is $7.89 billion. Each year in the past, the amount never exceeded $1 billion. But in the paper, it says in 2025 to 26, it will be $1.03 billion. In the past, it was only $500, $700, or $800 million per year. I went through the paper. I could not find a breakdown. So, how many lifts and walkways are we going to cover in 2024 to 25? How many points will we be connecting? Can we have more details on this? You're saying this will cost more than $1 billion. Does this mean you have more work to cover? Are we doing more lift? What causes this higher amount being more than $1 billion? DS, please. Thank you. Now, why we need more than $1 billion, $1.3 billion for 2025 to 26? This is because for Phase 2 and Phase 3 projects, they are getting to the middle and late stages, and that involves building the lift towers and installing those lifts. Those stages tend to be costlier. In August this year, we awarded the last works contract. That's why in 2025 to 26, the estimated budget will be higher than back in the past. Now on cost and MIC, 3 contracts adopt MIC. For the first 2 contracts, the cost was high, but by the time we get to the 3rd contract, the cost has gone down closer to older projects. When we have more new contracts, the cost will go down. Sorry, please wait for your second round. Maybe there won't be a second round. Well, we'll see about that. Mr. Chen Hockfeng. Thank you. This is a great policy. This is a view shared by members and members of the public. The government took action in response to comments about hygiene. That's progress. I'm looking at this as a whole. You build more such lift, building isn't the problem. Maintenance and repair involving follow-up are the key problem. For old buildings, the maintenance of those lifts ran into problems, including staff shortage. In the lift and escalator industry, we have a very limited number of repair workers, and that group of workers is aging. As you build more lifts and build more buildings, has the government assessed whether we have enough repair workers? Do we have enough qualified repair workers to make sure those lifts are safe? We're talking about lifts in outdoor settings. The wear and tear will be worse than the lift within buildings because you see more intense exposure for outdoor lifts. Failure to meet the maintenance repair requirements will lead to safety concerns. So has the government assessed whether we have a gap in the repair workers for lifts? If there's a gap, what do we do? The older the lifts get, the more frequent repairs will be needed, and you will need more spare parts. So that's my concern. DS or other officials? I'll answer part of the question. We do agree. Maintenance and repair matter. Building a lift and only to see that fall into disrepair, that would be a waste. We have 70,000 lifts in Hong Kong in total under the UA program. With all the project at hand completed, that will be 382 lifts. That's still a tiny portion. Still, maintenance and repair matter. We will remain in touch with the EMSD, Electrical and Mechanical Services Department, to make sure that department has enough resources to cover the maintenance and repair for the lifts under this UA program. Any follow-up? Chairman, my question went unanswered. Has the government assessed the manpower need? The government says there will be enough resources, but do we have enough people in that industry? We will have the Northern Metropolis. Many lifts will be put in place in the NM. When you have too many lifts, you overwhelm the industry. One group of people build the lift, but another group of people repair the lift. So any manpower gaps? It's only 382 lifts under this program, and there are 70,000 lifts in Hong Kong. So this program only makes up a tiny portion. So I'll see if my colleagues from the Highways Department has anything to say on manpower. Through the main contractor, we find subcontractors for installing the lift. I think installing with the follow-up actions should be fine. We don't have the figures on whether we have enough repair workers. Now, this program makes up a small portion of the lift in Hong Kong. When a problem comes up, most of the problems can be fixed within a couple of days. There are enough people to fix the problem. We do not have the data, but the reality on the ground is there is enough manpower to fix the problem swiftly. From what I've seen, I haven't seen any serious incident. The EMSD carries out preventive repairs with good results, so we don't see major problems. So for us, for the UA program, manpower should not be an issue.
Mr. Yim Kong. Thank you, Chair. The government has launched this UA program, and it's been very popular among members of the public, especially elderly people as well as people with disabilities. So this is a good program. There's a lot of rain in Hong Kong. 2/3 of the time we see rain this year. We see downpours. Lifts and subways are flooded during rainwater. And a lot of times, the areas near these flooded lifts are cordoned off. And this causes congestion issues. When there are floods, what do you do to deal with the flooded lifts, and are there any preventive measures? Thank you. In preventing floods, we added water bumps. We also have sensors. When there is a rise in water level, we use water bumps to remove the water. During typhoon in low-lying areas, we erect panels to help prevent floods. 2 hours before the hoisting of Typhoon number 8, we deployed contingency measures. We have a team that install these boards and panels in lifts. Other than that, we do not erect these water barriers. For example, a few days ago, there was a spring tide and we did not erect such water barriers. In terms of the design, we introduce a design in case there is a typhoon or there is flooding. The lifts can still be opened to the public for use because the parts will not be damaged. Any other follow-up questions? Two hours before a typhoon number 8 comes, people may have to rush home. So you have to ensure that people can use these lifts in times of typhoon. Thank you. Dr. Lo Wai Kwok. This UA program has been launched since 2012. We've seen results since the launch of the program. I'm happy to see that a lot of project items have been completed and some of them will be completed soon. Since 2012 until this financial year, about $7.89 billion have been approved by the Finance Committee. It's worth spending this money, and it is not a huge sum of money that we're talking about. And this program has benefited people in different districts in Hong Kong, so this is a good program. You have already told us that under the Capital Works Reserve Fund, for the 2025-26 financial year, you will apply for a funding of $1,031.72 million for this UA program. And I'll support this funding approval. The economy in Hong Kong is recovering slower than expected. We need more resources to be put in by the government. The basic economic principle is that when the private sector puts in less resources, the government has to put in more. Well, at least we can tell from this program that the government is still willing to allocate resources. This year, the Finance Committee has approved a funding of $157.3 billion for public works projects. However, there are people who are concerned about whether there will be works delays. I hope that we are just over worrying and that there won't be delays. So we have so many lifts now under the program. Can you tell us the total operating hours of these lifts and how many of these lifts have to be suspended because of wear and tear? What is the service level in general? Deputy Secretary. Thank you, Chair. We have completed 60% of the project items under the program, and we will complete the rest as soon as possible. On the service level, we got information from the EMSD over the past 5 years. The contractors of EMSD, 99% of the work that do not involve repair and maintenance works can be completed in between 24 to 72 hours. Over the past 3 years, there were 10 cases in which repair works took 3 days or longer. This is because it took time to procure the relevant parts. But in general, it took 9 days to complete such repair and maintenance works. I want to know the total number of service hours of these lifts and how many of these lifts have to be suspended because of different reasons. Do you have the relevant statistics? Well, please provide the information later. Ms. Jofi Chen. Thank you, Chair. I recognize this UA program. It's great that the government has been updating us about the progress and that it supervises the contractors' works. I don't know if you have a mechanism that recognizes the contractors' efforts. Note 4 of the paper mentions that there are 3 projects, one in Tsuen Wan District, TW01, one in Tung Chung, FT01, and another one in Yuen Long District, LP01. These 3 projects have been removed. This is disappointing. Like Dr. Low said, you are asking for funding, but some of the projects are not carried out. For the one in Tsuen Wan, TW01, back then, Mr. Michael Tin asked for the work's progress. Back then, the government said this project was not carried out by the Highways Department. the government said it had been in liaison with the relevant stakeholders, as well as the organizations responsible for the management of the relevant walkways. Back then, the government said that the contract would be awarded in 2021 and that the works would be carried out in Q3 2022. But then in October this year, the government went to the district council asking to remove this item. The government said that it had considered different factors and that it decided to delete the item. How come a few years ago you were so optimistic about this project? You gave false hope to the public and you wasted money and time, so you have to tell the public about the reason. Also, with a cap on the budget of $75 million, would you introduce more lifts in Tai Wo Hao? There was inclined lift. And 2022, this inclined lift cost $100 million. With the introduction of MIC now, would you be able to consider introducing such lifts with a reduced cost? Thank you. Highways Department. For project TW01, like Ms. Jovi Chen said, the organization responsible for maintaining the footbridge objected to the lift retrofitting works. That's why we removed this project from our program. Perhaps Mr. Zhang can tell you more about the discussion we had years ago with the relevant parties. Like Mr. Ng said, we had talked to the relevant owners. Back then, they said they would not object to the proposal. That's why we included the item in the contract. The footbridge was managed by the housing estate in Chun Wan. We talked about safety issues and which party should be responsible. However, we could not come up with an arrangement with the relevant owners. This is because we had to have the consent of the organization helping to maintain the footbridge in order to go ahead with the project. Chairman, I asked about the inclined lift. Perhaps you will have to wait for the next round? Well, let me say a few words. We have a $75 million cap for each project under this program. Can the project in Tai Wo Hao be included in this program? Our priority now is to finish the remaining 40% of the items. Then we will think about what to do with the other items. Perhaps we will only be able to address this at the next stage of the program. Mr. Kitson Young. Thank you, Chairman. I thank the Highways Department for maintaining communication with the district stakeholders. The projects were carried out smoothly, and a lot of the problems and issues were addressed promptly by the Highways Department. Many members recognize the program as a very great program. This program has been launched since 2012. We're now at the third phase, and we've seen results. According to your roadmap and timetable, you believe that all the programs will be completed by 2027. Afterwards, will you roll out the fourth phase, or do you have any plans for this program? Like Ms. Jovi Chen, will you consider introducing inclined lifts? will you be able to relax the cap on the budget? The public has a lot of expectations on this program. When you have completed all the items in hand, will you roll out new proposals? Also, I'd like to follow on a few projects in my district.
WTS-04, it's Chokjun South Estate. Estimated completion time 2027. But the work hasn't started. Some visits were done. I was told the work was going on. But the local residents said no progress has been seen. So will there be delays? People are worried. K94, Kowloon City, Hong Kong Road. Estimated completion Q1 2026. People have been calling for that for years. The advanced work was done. Why won't it be completed until the first quarter 2026? I want to find out why. DS. I thank Mr. Yang for his support. On the way forward for project, the priority now is to complete the remaining 40% of the project swiftly so that people have early access to these lifts. And then we will look at the circumstances and the resources at our disposal in deciding on the way forward. That's for the next step, and we won't be able to share details until then. Now, on the two projects, I want to invite my HYD colleagues to elaborate on those projects. WTS-04, as Mr. Yang said, over the past couple of months, less work was done. For Lift 2 in WTS-04, a special approach has been taken, and this means the submission of building plans was needed. So the contract allowed time for applying for building approval because it was like a private development, and some minor issues came up during the approval process. We had to get the property owners together. They have to endorse that plan for the approval process to go forward. So more time is needed. But we have factored in this time in the contract. Even with this minor problem, we won't see an impact on the completion time in 2026 to 27. So this will also be an MISC project. So the merits will also be reflected. Now, K64, that project is among the 9 projects associated with that contractor. Now we have a new contractor. The foundations have yet to be put there because of the rock layers. So we will need time for the foundations, for the site exploration. But the delay is very close to our heart. We are urging the contractor to get the work done as soon as they can. Mr. Michael Locke. This UA program is very popular at the district level. I want to follow up on some projects. Two Moon, NF 93 and 94. Spanning Minkum Road near King Lock House and Kinghua House. There were extensive media coverage, media reports. The site was there, little work was done with all the hoarding. Local residents were worried and there was obstruction of the street. I found out the reason was the Drainage Services Department and the MPL Corporation disagreed because the underground facilities may be affected. You started boarding up the area, and then the works were halted. The street was blocked. Have we seen similar things happening, and how do we make up for the lost progress? Now, in Tuen Mun and Yuen Long, some projects are close to the light rail transit stations. How are we coming along in terms of talking to the MTLC? Can we talk to the MTLC in one go about all those projects, or the project may get held up? The MTLCL may have their own safety considerations, and then the project may go nowhere. OT01 and OT02, Yao Oi Estate, Oi Hei House, and Ting Tek House. The projects are due to complete in Q3 and Q4 in 2028. Those projects are close to our offices, so local residents have asked about the progress. Highways Department, KF, NF93, NF94. We went on site visits with Mr. Lok. As Mr. Lok said, it's a narrow space. On the one side, you have the light rail transit. On the other side, stairs of the private residential sites, and there was a tree. After our last site visit, we have to talk to the light rail and also the drainage services department. Now, we have removed those barriers to reduce the nuisance for the local residents, and there's also a large tree. So we are gradually addressing the problem. And we don't have to cut down the tree. But we want to be able to build the lift without cutting down the tree. We have a new plan, and we will keep taking that plan forward. NF93 and N94 in Tuen Mun. OT01, OT02. Those are projects right next to light rail stations. Now, on whether we can talk to light rail about this. Now, we don't think light rail is deliberately making life difficult for the project. There are genuine safety concerns. When the project is too close to the light rail, it's hard to give blanket approval to all projects when they're too close to the light rail. We know there are requirements saying that the project cannot be within a certain parameter of the light rail stops. But we have to approach those projects on a case-by-case basis. We know there are problems. We are in touch with the light rail about this. So Mr. Chen Pui-leung is waiting to speak for the first round. Two other members have pressed the button to speak for the second round. So once we have covered Mr. Chen Pui-leung, we will get to the second round. Two members will be speaking for the second round. So I want to draw the line here. For the second round, each member gets 2 minutes, questions and answers inclusive. We will move on to Mr. Chen Pui-leung. So 382 lifts under the project. By 2027, we will still have 25 more lifts to go. For those 25 lifts, why can we not complete them by 2027? Are there problems, difficulties? When can we cover those 25 lifts? When can we complete them? Now, my second question is about maintenance. For each lift put in place, how much does it cost each year to maintain and repair such a lift? Now, for the future maintenance, the contract will go to some sort of contractor. Will there be tendering? When you have different contractors building and repairing the lift, can the same contractor that built the lift also take part in the tendering? And when you have one contractor that built the lift, can other contractors maintain those lifts given the parts involved and what's the lifespan of each lift installed. Thank you. The time it takes to install a lift is subject to different factors. It depends on the views of the stakeholders nearby and the underground public utilities to be relocated, the amount and how hard it is, and also interfacing with other public facilities. For the lift, the 20 or so lifts to be completed after 2027, I invite my colleagues from the highways department and also my colleagues will also discuss the maintenance costs. Now, 20 or so lifts cannot be completed until after 2027. As the DS said, a project started only in August this year. Each project takes 3 to 4 years. So this will take a while. Still, we appreciate the concerns from members and the public. It will urge contractors to plan ahead, coordinate, secure the approval, and get the rewiring of the underground utilities swiftly so that the contractor can complete the remaining works and then the lifts can be opened for use. Now, what we have now is only the projection. In the next year, we will be constantly reviewing the progress. We will urge the contractors to complete the installation as soon as they can. On maintenance, we entrust the maintenance and repair to the EMSD for the lifts completed. There's open tendering for the maintenance contract. So there is a way for the maintenance contractors to secure the parts. Now, on the lifespan of each lift, more than 10 years, or maybe longer. It depends on the routine maintenance and repair. As the DS said, from the data provided by the EMSD, ordinary parts can be replaced within 1 to 3 days. The maintenance and repair have been performed well. The EMSD also keeps close tabs on the performance of lift. If a lift requires frequent repairs, and then that may be a time for replacement. Now, Mr. Chen Xiu-hong will speak for the second round, 2 minutes, questions and answers inclusive. Thank you. Members, me included, want to find out the performance after the lifts are installed. So does the maintenance get costlier or harder? And what's the service? I know the government has obtained feedback from the local users. So can we get more comprehensive information after the meeting? Some lifts have been in use for maybe just a couple of months, but then other lifts have been in use for a longer time. So can we gather the feedback to see if those lifts, those facilities work as intended? Now, some projects have entered the construction phase. So that's why each year we see expenditure or budget of $700, $800 million. So it's not about extra costs. But then for some projects, adjustments are needed because we need new contractors for some project. So can we have a breakdown after the meeting? can we have a breakdown of which projects will enter the construction phase in a certain year so that we can see justification for the $700, $800 million per year cost? Or maybe we can provide a comprehensive paper setting out the information after the meeting.
Mr. Scotland, I'm following up on the questions I asked during the first round. The administration did not answer my question. In the future, what measures will the administration adopt to expand the UA program? Will it work with other government departments or bureaus to enhance accessibility? Deputy Secretary, as mentioned, our priority now is to complete the remaining 40% of the items as soon as possible so that they can be opened to the public soon. We won't wait until we finish the 40% of the items to decide on the way forward. We will listen to views of members. We'll also see whether the relevant government departments or bureaus have plans. This is what we're going to do for the next step. Thank you. Before we conclude this item, let me put this proposal to vote. Do members agree to submit this proposal to the Public Works Subcommittee for consideration? No objections? All right, thank you. Thank you, government representatives. Now we're going to talk about the fare increase applications from franchise bus operators. Let us invite the government representatives as well as the bus operators to join us. Members would like to put questions to the administration or the bus operators, please press the request to speak button. When we wait for the bus operators, let us first invite Ms. Ida Lee, Deputy Secretary for Transport and Logistics, to walk us through the paper. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman. Earlier this year, franchised bus operators submitted fare increase applications in respect of 3 bus franchises. Now we are handling the applications. We hope that at this meeting, we can listen to views of members so that we can make a decision that meets the expectations of the public as well as that meets the interests of the public. Fare increase applications have to do with livelihoods of people, so we will act as a gatekeeper to minimize the impact on the public. Also will ensure the financial position and sustainability of bus operators. The bus operators have told us about their financial position, and the government has provided details of the fare adjustment mechanism to members. Later on, the bus operators will tell members about the justifications for applying for fare increase. Franchised buses are a type of public transport outside of the MTR. Every day, the passenger journeys is about 3 million. Franchise buses play an important role in the public transportation system. Franchise buses are operated based on commercial principles. The government will ensure the sustainability development of bus operators. We've been encouraging bus operators to cut down on costs as well as expand revenue. For example, we encourage them to explore more sources of non-fare box revenue and rationalize their services so that bus operators can provide high-quality services as well as convenient bus services for the public. As mentioned in the paper we submitted, we will stick to the established procedure as we scrutinize the applications. We will take into account the 6 factors. They include the financial position of bus operators, public affordability and acceptability, as well as quality and quantity of service provided. Bus operators are exempted to pay for the tolls. Also, there is a toll exemption fund set up. If the Chief Executive in Council finds that there are justifications to approve the fare increase applications, we will make use of the fund to mitigate the effect of fare increase. We'll listen to members' views today, and we will consult the TAC before we make the recommendations to the CE in Council. Now I invite bus operators to tell you about their applications. Thank you. Now I will give time to each bus operator to tell us about their justifications. Yes, KMB. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for giving us time to brief members as well as the public about the justifications of our application. This January, we submitted the fare increase application. It's been 1.5 years since we applied for the last fare increase, and we have $390 million of balance in the TEF. In terms of operating environment, KMB is facing a drop of ridership compared to 2019. We see a drop of 9% in terms of daily ridership. This is due to changes in economic cycle, aging population, as well as change in people's commuting patterns. And people are going out less during weekends and at night. We're also seeing an expansion of the railway system, including Tuen Ma Line as well as East Rail Link. We see a loss of 130,000 passengers every day. The further expansion of the railway system will hit the bus operators, and these conditions are irreversible. We will increase services. However, the trend that I mentioned will decrease the revenue of bus operators. In terms of cost, staff costs account for 60% of our expenditure. We have to retain and attract staff, so we have to roll out attractive remuneration packages. Also, it's been hard for us to grasp the changes in fuel costs. Depreciation costs of our fleet account for 15%. To maintain good service, we cannot drop the cost. The recurrent operating expenditure accounts for 8%. With inflation, we see an increase in costs of parts and rents. Also, the high interest rate environment is boosting the cost of financing. So the drop in ridership is not linked to cost reduction. We've been trying to expand our non-fare box revenue. Apart from advertising business, we've been trying to introduce ads in mobile apps, as well as displaying ads on external walls of depots. We're also introducing smart lockers. We're also providing repair, maintenance, as well as refueling services for commercial vehicles. With a drop in ridership, We understand that non-fare box revenue is crucial. However, we must adopt a new thinking and mindset, and we have to expand our businesses in order to increase revenue. We will continue to look for breakthroughs. However, currently we have not been able to make any breakthroughs. With all these circumstances, we're seeing a continuous drop in returns, so we do not have enough capital to build new depots, procure new buses, or upgrade our equipment. And this affects the long-term development of our company. With the current situation, we find it necessary to make timely adjustment to the bus fares. Even with the challenging operating environment, we seek to continuously improve our services. You can tell from the paper that we are improving in terms of our accident rate as well as lost trip rate. We're also upgrading our maintenance works to reduce any bus incidents. It is our responsibility to improve our services, so we understand that we have to contribute to the community. On the environment front, we have been promoting green transport and energy saving. We take care of our elderly as well as the economy. To shoulder the social responsibility, we nurture young people, women, as well as ethnic minorities and the underprivileged. I'm not going to go into the details here in the interest of time. However, I believe all of you can see our contributions. As a responsible company, we have to ensure our financial sustainability. We hope that through fare increase, we can maintain our financial viability so that we can continue to contribute to the community. Thank you. Now I invite representatives from the city bus to tell us about the application.
Good morning, members. Thank you for hearing us today on this fare application adjustment. I'll take you through some quick slides.
Can you keep close to the microphone?
Talking about where we are today and the justification around the request on the fare increase. We're still at, as you can see, 89% of the fare box revenue that we had going back from pre-COVID. But one of the critical things I want to draw attention to is the work we've done inside the business to reduce our operating costs. So from 2022 to 2023, we've reduced our operating costs by 5.2%. That's actually equivalent to $144 million. So our loss position would be $144 million worse if we hadn't taken those actions. When we roll that forward to this year, we've got about a 4% saving from 2023 to 2024, and we continue to do that to drive value for the government and citizens in Hong Kong. But critically, our loss position in 2022 of 39 million and in 2023 of 57 million. There's big business challenges affecting revenue. The railway has had a huge impact. The opening of the East Rail Line contributed to a 17% loss of patronage on the cross-harbour routes, and that's an overall loss on our F3 business of 5.7%. 51,000 people less every day travelling on our network. And also on Hong Kong Island, we have an ageing and declining population and more extreme weather events. You know, an extreme weather event can cost on a single day around $9.5 million in revenue. The fare adjustment mechanism as we have today is lagging behind inflation. There's three big factors in our business: labour cost over 60%, and we have to maintain competitive packages for our employees. And the franchise bus industry has long lacked enough bus drivers, though we're happy to say we have resolved that problem this year, and we're now in a very good position through the actions that we've taken, both in terms of packages, but also how we treat and how we look after our staff. Critically, we can see in the chart here that fare adjustment is 25% behind inflation. And that's a really, really key factor. And we have to rebalance that, and we have to make sure in the future that we can parallel the two together. When we look at the fare adjustment application, the rate we've applied for actually equates to $0.8 on an average fare of $8.10. And that is an average fare. There's many, many fares that sit well below that schedule. Some fares as little as $3.30 when we're looking at section fares, particularly on Hong Kong Island. And the quantum of the fare is absolutely critical. We're in a situation today where we're selling our services without having enough revenue coming in to operate them. So would you ask a supermarket to sell a can of food for less than they buy it for? That's where we are today, and we need to ensure we move that forward. With manpower, we have to diversify. I mentioned about the need to provide good employment packages, look after people, because there's a reciprocal spend in the economy in Hong Kong if we do that. Having enough staff will generate economic prosperity, not just in our businesses, but across the whole of Hong Kong. And, you know, the wage inflation rate is consistently above CCPI. You only have to look at the civil service pay increases as well that are sitting well above that. We are supporting the Hong Kong government in many actions, particularly around the Chief Executive's drive to increase tourism. And yesterday, we launched officially our open-top sightseeing buses. This is supporting economic growth, prosperity, and the redevelopment and the reopening of Hong Kong. In terms of doing that, we want to showcase Hong Kong as a destination to visit globally. And we're seeing amazing patronage growth in these new activities. In addition, we're going to start next year a customer loyalty program that will offset some of the...
Sorry, Richard. We are pressed for time. Can you speed up?
I'll just conclude, yeah. So there's a customer loyalty program which will launch next year, which is critical in offsetting and driving greater value. I just want to end really on two things. Non-fare revenue, we're working very hard. We've renegotiated our advertising contracts for bus shelters and for buses, having increased that by about 30%. We're also applying for initiatives in bus stations such as lockers and vending machines. That has to be remembered, the quantum of any non-fare box is small compared to the bus fare revenue. And lastly, to end, the community is very important. Our community interaction, the well-being of citizens, our bus users, and people across Hong Kong is key. Our investment in this is considerable. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, 好。跟住係
We then come to new Lantau bus.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, full screen. Okay, full screen. Oh. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, honourable members, ladies and gentlemen. We are the New Lantau Bus Company 1973 Limited, often referred to as NLB. And although NLB is the smallest franchise in town, it is arguably one of the most diversified. Our services include intense double-deck frequency routes internally in Tung Chung, deeply rural routes into the South Lantau Park, with beaches, mountains and the villages there, border routes and airport routes. NLB treasures this privilege to serve such a wide range of passengers, and we are dedicated and committed to continuous improvements in service quality initiatives. As well as serving customers, we are an employer of choice for some 500 members of staff. Some vital statistics here. We convey about 34 million passengers per year with 150 buses or so. About the average age of the bus, 9 years, and the number of routes at the moment is 29, but we do have ambition for more. Our financial performance, the story is one of many years of deep losses, but the good news is that we are now at essentially a break-even position. And this is something which we are running hard to stand still to stay there at the moment. Examples, and notwithstanding the finances, some examples of those quality and safety initiatives. We are continuously delivering the lowest bus industry lost trip rate. We're on the pathway to zero emission. We've already taken 4 buses with electric. And I think we're not complacent in any way, but we have embedded a safety culture over the last few years, which has noticeably changed the behaviours of drivers. We can see less speeding, very few isolated cases now, and some industry metrics on safety which are better than the industry average. But as I said, we're not complacent in any way. We just invested in 11 brand new double-deckers, suitable for both the urban and the rural routes. About 27% of our fleet is now fitted with the driver monitoring system, and we've invested in improved service monitoring and supervision, including some, you'll see if you go out at weekends, lots of extra people on the streets watching our routes. The reason for the fare increase, in a nutshell, is that we believe that we would like to seek reasonable returns after years of losses. Since the last increase, bus captains have received around an 8% increase, and as I said earlier, we are really running hard to stand still as the revenue increases in recent times are being matched by cost increases. So we're sort of at that position now where we need a fare increase to push us into the returns, reasonable returns, to give us a sustainable future so that we can continue to do what we love to do and invest in our business for the people of Hong Kong. So thank you. That really does conclude my presentation today, and I hope that we can take some questions afterwards. Thank you very much.
Okay, Ho.
We now open the floor for questions from members. Time is tight, so we're trying to be able to stay in this conference room because we have a meeting with district councillors afterwards. So I'm trying to get the Secretariat to let us stay in this room for as long as we can. Many members are lining up to speak. I want to give every member time to put questions, so let's do 4 minutes per member. But please stick to this time limit. 4 minutes. Please try not to overrun. And for the government and the bus operators, be brief in your reply. We start with Mr. Frankie Yik. Thank you, Chairman. Nobody likes to see higher fares, but people want pay rises. As people can see from the slides, wage costs make up 60%. That's for land transport. At sea, it's almost 70%. And for the staff at bus operators get pay rises every year. In 2023, we can see bus operators got a profit, but that's even below than the time deposit at banks. And then another operator ran a loss in 2023. So that can't work. People are complaining about fare rises higher than inflation. People say that makes no sense. But as the operator said, over the past 15 years, fare rises up 25%. But the cumulative inflation was more than 50%. So why this gap? It's a structural issue. So the government needs to take note. After a fare rise, you cannot ask for another rise right away. You need figures over 6 to 9 months. Otherwise, your rejection will get rejected by the Transport Department right away. And when you do apply for a fare rise, it will take 1 year, 2 years. There will always be a lag. So because of this time lag, that rise will always exceed the inflation, and that explains this gap, 25%. You will always be falling behind. That's why I've been saying it's very hard to be in the public transport business. Nobody is making a profit except the MTR. So we need to be clear on this. Let's look at a figure. Over the past 15 years, median household income for a family of 3, that income rose by 84% from 2008 to 2023. And for a family of 4, the median household income went up by 104% over the same period, 2008 to 2023. So we need to take a fair view of the fare rise applications. Now, for the government, we need the government's help with the non-fare box revenue. We need more such revenue to meet the expenses. So there were attempts at advertising on the external walls of bus depots, but policy support is falling short. At the Lands Department, they ask for premium. But if that money goes into premium payment, then where is that money to offset the cost increase? That's why non-fare box revenue matters to mitigate fare rises. So we need better internal communication within the government. We need to address that problem with the premium. Non-fare box revenue need to help offset fare rises. I will stop here. So can we get a brief response from the Deputy Secretary about the non-fare box revenue? We understand the importance of non-fare box revenue. So we have been actively exploring with operators ways to increase the non-fare box revenue. And when we have an application from the Transport Department and other government departments are involved, the TD plays an active part in helping to sort out the matter. So we will keep working with the operators. I'll read out the lineup of members: Dr. Lo Wai-kwok, Mr. Michael Tin, Mr. Scott Leung, Mr. Lok Chung-hong, Mr. Chen Siu-hong, Mr. Edward Leung, Mr. Chen Hock-fong, Mr. Dominic Lee, Mr. Stanley Lee, Dr. Tik Ji-yun, Mr. Kit Sen-yang, Mr. Chen Pui-leung, Ms. Zhou Fi-chen, Mr. Gary Zhang, Ms. Connie Lam, Mr. Ring Kong, followed by me. So 17 members, me inclusive. Let's start with Dr. Lo Wai-kwok. For franchised bus services, people want safe and reliable services. People also want a reasonable fare. We have just heard about the financial performance. City bus seems to be in the most problematic position. The loss was close to $60 million. But the chart also left us wondering. From 2009 onwards, over nearly 10 years, no fare rise, but the costs kept rising. So was it because City Bus made huge profits over those 10 years and that's why there was no fare increase? An even bigger challenge is that bus fleets need to go electric, or even they have to go hydrogen. So what about the investment in electric and hydrogen vehicles? This is not just a question for the bus operators, but also for the government. What's the government's position? If we factor in that sort of investment, the figures get complicated. We want to keep reducing our carbon emissions. We want carbon neutrality. And one way to get there is to work on public transport. We have to cut the emissions from public transport. So that's also a big problem. And this is a money issue. Now, given this performance, and we have to look at the future, the investment for the future. So that's not just for the bus operators, it's also a question for the government. So can we first hear from the government, Deputy Secretary? Indeed, we have to adopt new energy public transport. Starting from 2015, the government has been rolling out subsidies. 36 single-deck electric buses have been bought for trials. The EEB, Environment and Ecology Bureau, will also announce a green transition roadmap for public transport. And then under the new transport fund, there are subsidies for electric buses. That will help bus operators buy electric buses. In doing that, bus operators also have to invest on their side. The government gives assistance as much as we can. On financial sustainability and robustness, bus operators have to be able to provide services and invest in those new energy transport. Bus operators also have to keep investing in better facilities and better services. So these factors are also something we consider.
Can you explain why Citybus did not increase its fares for 10 years? Deputy Secretary. We saw a merger in terms of franchise for Citybus, and previously, some of the routes were not run by Citybus. Perhaps we can invite the Citybus to tell you more. I want to understand why for so long there wasn't a bus fare increase for Citybus. Perhaps you can follow up on this on other occasions. Mr. Michael Teen, on this fare increase applications, I want to emphasize 2 points. First, Roundtable thinks that the fare increase should not be higher than inflation. It should be in line with the power tariffs of the two power companies. Also, there should be a fare adjustment mechanism to deal with bus fare increase. There should be a yearly review of the fare increase, making use of the median monthly household income of people. It should align with the MTR fare adjustment mechanism. Our economy is in doldrums. We look at our economy to decide whether there should be a bus fare increase. KMB and the Citybus increased their fare by 3.9%, 4.9% last year, respectively. And for New Lantau Bus, there was about 7% increase last year. In 2023 to 24, the cumulative inflation rate was 3.4%. If the fare increase endorsed by the government is higher than 3.4%, we will not support that. Also, if you look at the power companies' power tariffs increase as well as MTR fare increase, they are linked with the inflation rate. For CLP, the increase is half of the inflation rate. How come there is no mechanism for bus fare increase? We think that there should be a fare adjustment mechanism like the one applied by the MTR. The fare for buses should be reviewed yearly so that there won't be a huge discussions here as well as at the TAC for the fare increase applications every 2 to 3 years' time. If you put in place a mechanism, the fare increase will be in line with the inflation. Now, I want to know the position of the 3 franchise bus operators. What do they think about having a mechanism that is packed with the inflation and drawing reference from the median monthly household income when adjusting the fare increase? I want to know the positions of the 3 bus operators. KMB, please. I think there are perks to this mechanism. It will ensure our financial sustainability, and we can expect the fare increase in a more predictable manner. Mr. Michael Dean talked about inflation rate. For example, fuel costs can be much higher than the inflation. So we have to be careful in this. We welcome this mechanism. How about Citybus? We welcome to put in place a regular fare adjustment mechanism. However, it will have to be a transparent one and a fair one. It will have to take into consideration our fuel costs as well as inflation rate. I'm only talking about an inflation-linked mechanism. We welcome a regular mechanism. However, we'll have to look carefully at the parameters. I still have 30 seconds. You have to take into consideration the inflation rate. How about New Lantau Bus? Thank you, Mr. Tin. I think all the bus operators are the same. Our costs are similar. We understand from the public's perspectives, it is painful for them to see a fare increase, so we welcome a regular mechanism. You say that there should be an inflation-packed mechanism. I think we can consider this. Yes, Mr. Scotland. The bus operators are applying for fare increase, and I don't think I can agree to this. So I do not support the fare increase applications. According to the bus operators, they are facing competitions from MTR. The reality is that we'll have to rely more on the railway system in the future. If you're saying there is a drop in ridership because of railway development, I think this is going to be the case in the future. How can the bus operators improve their services to attract passengers? Well, first they can do it through an attractive fare. For some of the bus routes currently, as I mentioned previously, some of the fares are higher, some of the fares are lower for the same bus route. For passengers, they will have to wait for some time to get on the bus, and if they have to wait for very long, they do not appreciate the bus services. If you implement different levels of bus fares, then perhaps your bus routes would be more popular. From Nathan Road to Sham Shui Po, the bus fares range from $5 to $7. And this is not attractive for passengers. Turning to bus facilities, this is not just a responsibility of bus operators, but also a transport department. In Shanwon Road, there is a bus stop from City Bus, and there was mention that there should be a sheltered bus stop, but because of underground utilities and also cost problems, there were disputes. Understand that the city bus should not shoulder all the costs, but what did the transport department do? Nothing. It did not follow up on this. It did not talk to the public utilities organizations. How many years have we been waiting for a sheltered bus stop? People have to wait in line in bad weather. Of course, they complain. Doesn't the transport department have the responsibility to deal with this? It is not just the bus operators' responsibility. How can the government help improve bus facilities to enhance passengers' experience? Thank you. The administration first. Yes, Deputy Secretary. Thank you, Chairman. We agree that bus operators have to enhance their service levels. We see that they have been upgrading their hardwares. They have been trying to retain talents to ensure that there are enough bus captains. They have made efforts. On section fares, different bus operators have rolled out section fares. We have to be careful, however. We have different considerations. Chairman, let's not waste time on this. Can the government just address the problem about sheltered bus stops? Would they help implement sheltered bus stops? Well, let me ask the Transport Department to tell you more. Thank you, Chair. the Transport Department has been liaising with the relevant parties, and we encourage bus operators to build sheltered bus stops. We will follow up on this. Thank you. Mr. Benson, Mr. Michael Luke. I'm an election committee sector member, and I do not agree to the fare increase. Members of the labor unions aren't happy with the fare increase. If you are increasing their pay by 6.5%, perhaps I would agree to these fare increase applications. But the reality is that is not the case. You cannot tell us that you're going to increase the bus captain's pay in one go, because this fare increase exceeds the nominal wage index, as well as the inflation, as well as the median monthly household income. And all three bus operators are asking for such a huge fare increase. I think we can come up with different solutions to help bus operators increase their non-fare bus revenue. For example, there can be monthly passes, we can have section fares. The government can also offer support to the bus operators. I'd like to bring up 2 points. Can bus operators make use of their apps to roll out, for example, online shopping services? Can there be pickup points at bus depot, like Taobao? I think this is a great way to increase revenue. Another question for the government. Some people asked whether the bus operators have broken up their revenue or manipulate figures. Have some of the downstream sector services been outsourced to other companies? Does the revenue that is related to the real estate sector or the advertisements business, do they benefit other companies or groups? Deputy Secretary, on non-fare box revenue, under the current bus franchises, they are included in the bus operator's account. In other words, when we assess the financial positions of the bus operators, we take into account the revenue from advertisements. As to whether some of the revenue is distributed to other companies, we understand that when franchise bus operators enter into different contracts, they have to follow certain rules. And these contracts are awarded through open tender exercises to ensure that these contracts are awarded under a fair principle. So members can be rest assured about this. You mentioned that there were open tender exercises, but did you try to find out whether there were certain relationship between the downstream sector companies as well as the bus operators, which might allow bus operators to transfer some of the revenue to other companies? I understand the members' concern. There were open tender exercises. Whether or not the downstream sector companies are linked to the bus operators in any way, the open tender exercise were carried out through established procedures. And also these contracts are renewed regularly. Sometimes the contractors are linked to the bus operators, sometimes not. As long as the open tender exercises were carried out publicly, there wouldn't be any transfer of benefits. Thank you.
Mr. Chen Xiuhong. Now I'm looking at the fare rise increase. It looks worrying because these are large increases. But let's take a more objective view. It's somewhere between 6.5% to 9.5%. So how reasonable are these rises? We have looked at the figures from the bus operators. The government has even more information available. We would like to see the government to serve as the gatekeeper. From the paper here, we don't see the full picture. From 2014 to 2021, KMB did not raise its fares for 7 years. Now for city bus and new Nantao bus, there were roughly 10, or rather city bus and NWF bus, no fare rise over 10 years. And then for a number of years, New Lantau did not raise their fare. But then in recent years, a fare rise almost every year with larger fare rises. But let's go back to the fare adjustment arrangement. There are factors within this arrangement for the government to consider. We don't have the figures. Now, the Executive Council will have the figures and then balance the factors. But the question is, bus operators provide a public service. They're also businesses. So we have to make sure that bus operators, which have to ensure they're sustainable, and then we also have to consider that there's depreciation and there's competition from the MTR Corporation. We have to bear these factors in mind. So at the end of the day, there were things to ensure. First, cut costs, achieve savings where possible, and also find non-fare box revenue where possible. The government said it would give support. But for the 3 bus operators, if you have trouble finding the revenue, you can talk to the government about this. Now I come to my question. Reasonable fiscal or financial position. It's in paragraph 6 of the government's paper. Now I see this figure, 8.7%. So is there reasonable financial return that the government has in mind? And whatever the fare increase to be approved, we also have to bear in mind the $2 scheme. With the fare rise, the government will have to offer greater subsidies because of the $2 scheme. So for the government, as it is reviewing the $2 scheme, has the fare rises as a factor been considered? A brief response, please. The government will be the gatekeeper here. We will take full account of the factors. We will then decide on the recommended fare increase to be put forward to the Executive Council. The paper mentions the reasonable returns. Under the fare adjustment arrangement, there are various factors. One of them is the reasonable return or reasonable rate of return. Now, there is no guaranteed rate of return. It's not what you see with other public utilities. So we have considered different indices. One factor we look at is the net average fixed assets return on ENFA. Now, the weighted average cost of capital is roughly 8.7%. That's what you can see in the paper, in the footnote. We also have to factor in other factors. So we're not just looking at the ENFA. What about the $2 scheme? Sorry, you have overrun. We move on to the next member, Mr. Edward Leung. My question is for city bus. Did the city bus make a profit or run a loss last year overall? So I'm covering Hong Kong Island, Cross Harbour Route, North Lantau, everything put together. So that's a question for Citybus.
We recorded an operating loss last year and are still in a loss-making position today.
幾多錢呢？
How much in terms of the loss?
Position in 2023 was 57.4 million.
唔好講大話喎，呢度立法會嚟嘅喎。
Don't lie, this is LegCo altogether. I'm saying including Hong Kong Island, Cross Harbour Route, North Lantau, rural areas, new territories, altogether.
The two franchises as entirely separate operations. That's how they're considered by the government, and we work within that remit. So you can't cross-subsidise between the F2 franchise for Lantau and the Hong Kong Island and New Territories franchise.
全部都係 under 城巴嘅。
All of them are under Citybus. Since he's not saying this, I will tell people whether it's loss or profit based on the open data. Now, we may not have the full year data, but altogether, but the overall profit is $100 million. So this loss of $57 million is a lie to the public. We have to recognize that. That's my first point. My second point, the ad revenue has been contracted to an associated company, and this is a transfer of profit. This means this associated company is involved, and then you reflect the amount in the financial statements. So the profit is not just $100 million. And then the parent company paid dividends to the shareholders, $200 million and $250 million. Then let's look at the loss trip rate. It's above the other operators. So it's not in a good operating position. So the government needs to play its role as a gatekeeper. Public tendering isn't good enough as a way to guard against the transfer of profits. Now, for the government, we will have a penalty system. There's no such penalty system for buses. Deputy Secretary. The member mentioned possible transfer of profit. When bus operators look for business partners, they have to go through an established procedure. Businesses do have contractors that applies to other operators and even other industries. When ad businesses are involved, they find ad agencies to do that. What matters is that in this process, there's no transfer of interests. Public tendering means different service providers can take part in this process, and then the contract is awarded through public tendering. Now, for an ad service contractor, they will also be looking for a profit. When the price is obtained through public tendering, then there's no transfer of interest. I want to make this clear. Now, if needed, maybe the bus operators can tell us about their procurement process. But we are out of time, so let's follow up on this issue on other occasions. Mr. Chen Hock-Fong. Now, I'm looking at the FAA in the paper. The fare rises are 3.63%, but two operators are asking for double and one operator asking for 3 times the amount. So my question for the Transport Department is, how does the TD make sure the fare rise does not deviate from what you get from under the FAA too much? I have a question for Citybus. There was a merger. You want greater efficiency. That's why you have the merger. But now, after the merger, the efficiency is getting worse. Higher accident rate, you're losing money, you're getting fewer riders. And so after this merger, things got worse. Is there accountability for the management? city bus is not taking responsibility, and now it's passing the buck to the public. Does that make sense? Now, I have a question for New Lantau bus. Rural residents are saying over weekends, the fares are different. The fares go up over weekends because of tourists. But then for local residents, they have to put up with the higher fares over weekends. So they try not to go out on Sundays because it's up by 80%. Fares up by 80%. So are there actions taken by New Lantau Bus to look after the mobility needs of local residents? DS? About the fare increase applications and this formula, how we should make sense of the figures, of these figures. The government serves as the gatekeeper here. We consider the different factors under the FAA. That formula is one of the factors. The financial position of bus operators, public acceptance, public affordability are all factors that we take into account. And then afterwards, we will go to the Transport Advisory Committee, and also we put the proposal to the Executive Council. Now, the member also mentioned efficiency, operational efficiency. And maybe we can invite City Bus to tell us more in a moment. In looking at fare rise applications, we also consider the synergy to be achieved from merger. Now, as for the question about New Lantau, we invite New Lantau Bus to tell us more. So we start with New Lantau Bus. We thank the member for his questions. Now, for New Lantau Bus, in South Lantau, there is a holiday or weekend fare. On those days, many visitors and also local residents also go to South Lantau. More people take the bus. That sort of fare is actually a kind of subsidy for the local residents. Without this holiday or weekend fare, if we have a standard fare Mondays through Sundays, you will actually see higher fares every day. Because over weekends or holidays, more people take the bus. Their fare is subsidizing the fare for local residents. And we have been in touch with the local residents. Local residents have told us about the higher fares. I cannot recall the year, but I think it was 3 or 4 years ago. There was the same-day return discount. So for someone, you take a bus from South Lantau to Tongchong or Mui Wo, and you return on the same day, you get a discount. And that will be equivalent to what you get on a weekday. So please follow up on this matter on other occasions. Now, I will extend the meeting for 45 minutes. So let's stick to the time limit. Mr. Dominic Lee. Our economy is facing challenges. People are under pressure. Any fare rise will mean further pressure on people. People take the bus every day. Bus operators have the responsibility to ride out the tough times together with the public. They shouldn't just pass on the pressure onto the public. I have a question first for KM City Bus.
Lantau Bus have applied for fare increases of 6.5%, 9.5%, and 6.5% respectively. So we can see that City Bus proposed increases significantly higher than those of other companies. And yet, the accident rate for City Bus is higher than the industry average. So what's the reason behind this disparity? 政府有冇進一步
Does the government require bus operators to step up safety. Now, I found out this from media reports. Tai Lam Tunnel may lower its tolls. Given that possible fall in the toll, people expect a lower bus fare for those routes. So outside the toll exemption fund, will the government require the bus operators to charge a lower fare for those routes? The 3 bus operators see lost trips. That problem is serious, and that brings inconvenience for the public. Do we have plans from the government or bus operators to improve their service standard?
The administration first. On the question about the toll exemption fund, currently, under the TEF mechanism, bus operators are exempted from government tolls, and the money will go into the fund to mitigate the effect of fare increase. That means it can offset the fare increase. When we took back the Western Harbour Crossing, we also put money into the TEF. And when we dealt with the fare increase last year, the TEF helped offset the fare increase so that the fare rise was relatively moderate. This time around, when we process the applications, we will take into account the effect of fare increase, and we will also consider the use of fund. City Bus.
Firstly, I'll draw attention to the profit and loss in the Transport Department paper, Annex B. And you can see that we're reducing the loss year on year. 2023 recorded a loss of 59.3 million. Now, you might say when you look at the loss and profit after tax, including subsidies, the number increases over 2022, but that is down to a reduction in the subsidy payment. On the matter of the tunnels, as noted by the administration, the TEF fund is set up to offset that. However, we're still paying substantial toll fees going through the tunnels. Maybe a question in the future whether that toll fee could be reduced or removed to offset future fare increases.
How about the accident rate?
The accident rate has increased as we increase mileage after the pandemic. And in Hong Kong Island, there is a particular issue with the density of the streets. We have implemented a number of driver improvement systems and working with our trade unions and the National Federation. And in 2024, we're seeing significant reductions in accidents. What is to note, though, those accidents are minor. There's an absolute focus on safety, and there have been no serious incidents or fatalities directly attributed to Citybus in over 2 years.
好，跟住請李世榮。
All right, Mr. Stanley Lee. Thank you, Chairman. As a matter of fact, after the bus operators have submitted their fare increase applications, many people said they cannot accept such fare rise. Just now, the government said it would take into account the public acceptability as well as the affordability. How do you assess people's acceptability and affordability? People want me to tell you that they cannot afford the fare rise. This is my first point. The bus operators put forward some reasons for fare increase. According to the paper, in 2023, the average daily passenger journeys was 3.6 million. And in the first half of 2024, it was 3.7 million. So we saw more passengers, but at the same time, we need a fare increase. What is the reason? We see that the ridership has recovered to about 90 to 95% compared to before the COVID time. Do we need such a significant fare increase? Has the government monitored whether the bus operators have tried to compress their costs as well as expand revenue before they consider the fare applications? Deputy Secretary, As we process the applications, we have to take into consideration different factors. For example, member mentioned about there might be changes in operating costs, and we have to take into account the operation efficiency. We will look at all these factors as we deal with the applications. At the same time, we also look at the public acceptability. How do you assess people's acceptability? Well, we take into consideration objective factors as well as parameters. For example, we look at the median monthly household income as well as the composite consumer price index. We look at the changes in these figures as a reference. Also, I mentioned that there is a rise in ridership, and also, have you looked at whether the bus operators try to compress their costs? As I mentioned, when we process the applications, we will stick to the established mechanism and take into account the various factors and make a prudent decision before we make a recommendation to the CE in Council. No, I'm asking whether you have looked at whether the bus operators have tried every means to raise revenue and cut expenditure. When we make the assessment, well, today we're mainly here to listen to members' views. After we've collected your views, we will again look at the mechanism and take into account different factors before we make a prudent assessment. All the factors mentioned by the member just now will be taken into account by us. We will also look at the changes in operating costs. We will try to see whether bus operators have made an effort to raise revenue and cut back on costs. Chairman, I hope that the government can monitor closely the bus operators. It has the responsibility to do so. The government should not wait until they have submitted the fare increase applications to monitor the performance of the bus operators. However, I don't see that the government has been making efforts to help the public monitor the performance of the bus operators. I hope the government would do this regularly. The government should not wait until the bus operators submit fare increase applications to look at whether they have made an effort. On monitoring the bus operators, we have been monitoring the safety as well as the quality of their services. The Transport Department has been monitoring all these. It is not that we wait until they submit applications to assess all these. It's just that when we process the applications, we will make a holistic assessment. We will not slack on the monitoring effort. Dr. Teck Shi-yun, we have geographical constituency as well as election committee sector members opposing to the fare increase. I am a functional constituency member and I also object to the fare increase applications. We should not allow the bus operators to ask for an unjustly large amount of fare increase. The truth is that, for example, KMB has recorded profit, New Lantau as well. For the city bus, it looks like it has recorded a loss, but like Mr. Leung Hee said, it made a profit of $110 million for airport and Lantau routes. The bus operators are very greedy. If you ask any businesses, it would be very lucky if they are making a fortune now. Just now there was a meeting about increasing CSSA, and the increase in CSSA can't even catch up with the bus fare increase. Also, we see that there is a drop of 20% of fuel costs around the world. So this should be a very good opportunity for us to slow down fare increase. Another point I want to make is about non-fare box revenue. For KMB, we see 10-odd%, and for city bus, it's less than 10%. in terms of the fare box revenue. If you're not making enough revenue and you are asking for a fare increase, I think it is unreasonable. Bus operators aren't making an effort to run their businesses. Now they are asking for the moon. As mentioned, the government is dispersing subsidies for the bus operators. I hope the government can really be a good gatekeeper here. Deputy Secretary. As mentioned repeatedly, we will take into account the various factors under the current mechanism. We have to adopt a balanced approach. We have to take into account public acceptability and affordability. At the same time, we also have to look at the financial position of bus operators to ensure that they are in a good financial position and that they can make a reasonable return to provide quality services for the public. So members, please be rest assured that we will make a prudent assessment before we submit our recommendations. Don't tell me about the principles. This is a huge burden on the public. You mentioned about the reasonable return. How do you define reasonable return? I'm asking you, what do you mean by a reasonable return? How much money do the operators have to make in order to ensure a reasonable return? Paragraph 2 of our paper mentions that there is a fare adjustment arrangement for franchised buses, and there are different factors for us to assess the increased application. I'm asking you, what do you mean by a reasonable return? You must have a standard, right? What is your standard? Well, let me finish, please. We've set out the 6 factors in the paper. In relation to a reasonable rate of return, we explain in the footnote that the reasonable return serves as a reference for us. In the bus industry, there is no guaranteed minimum level of rate of return. However, the government makes reference to the weighted average cost of capital, and this is a common parameter that we adopt. Right. Cost of capital. Mr. Kitson Young. I feel annoyed by the fare increase applications made by the bus operators because they totally ignore the affordability of the public. I think Dr. Tig had a point. It is already lucky for businesses that manage to make a fortune now, and you are now trying to loot money from the public, and this is unacceptable. For KMB, it's making a huge profit. For some of the routes, for routes that are losing money, they are cutting their services. This is not just to the public. We've been talking about adapting to and embracing changes now. All I see from the bus operators is that they have been lying flat. They keep asking the public for money, and I don't find this appropriate. One of your reasons for fare increase is that there is a huge increase in fuel costs. That's why you have to submit these applications. However, when I talk to the bus operators, I realize that the bus companies did not put forward any proposals to offset the increase in fuel costs. Isn't it common sense for you to try to offset the fuel costs? If there is no way for you to stabilize the fuel costs, that's not doing just to the public. Power companies have long-term measures to offset the increase in oil costs or fuel costs, so you should follow suit. Bus operators are saying that they get competitions from the MTRC. Well, have you tried different ways to lure passengers back? Like Mr. Scotland said, will you consider putting in place mechanism like section fares to attract passengers to take buses? Currently, you're rolling out very few section fares or relevant discounts. If buses are more expensive than the MTR, then of course I would take the MTR. You haven't tried your best to lure businesses, and this is unacceptable. I'm not trying to teach you how to do business here. For high-speed rail link in the mainland, they try to expand their logistics businesses. Like Mr. Michael Luke said, there is a huge bus fleet under KMB. You have many service points. Have you thought about developing logistics businesses? You have to identify changes in order to survive. I think the management of the bus operators have to be accountable for this. You are lying flat and you are asking the public to shoulder the cost. This is unacceptable.
So looking for other sources of revenue. So that's the comment from Mr. Kitson-Yang. Any brief response from the government? I don't think there will be time for the bus operators. Thank you. I note the members' concerns about cost control and exploring new revenue. We help franchisees find non-fare box revenue. If bus operators have ideas and they need support, we give that support in policy. Each bus operator takes different measures given their own cost structure. Now, we cannot go into the measures taken by each operator here, but we know that each bus operator takes their own cost structure very seriously because that will have a bearing on their own profit, and they will continue to work on this. Mr. Chan Pui-Leung. Thank you. In September, our annual inflation will be 2.1%, and even after you factor in other reasons, and now the fare rise asked for is 6.5% to 9.5%, and that's beyond what people can afford. This is unacceptable. Now, my concern is more about the management of the bus operators. The largest fare rise this time asked for is 9.5%. But I'm looking at this company. It's the worst performing company in terms of accidents. Accident rate from 3.99% to 5.65%. Of course, we heard the explanation was that we have narrower streets and the density, but that is no excuse for this rate. In terms of running a business, let's look at the pre-COVID years, and we contrast that with the post-COVID years. In 2023, the two other bus operators turned a profit, but this one company continued to run a huge loss. Shareholders lose when you run a loss, but there's more than that. That loss also becomes something that the public will have to pick up the bill for. So my question for the government is, in terms of the management and performance of bus operators, does the government monitor such factors? Does the government look at the situation of a bus operator quarter by quarter? If a bus operator is struggling, does the government get that operator to improve its performance so that we don't wait till the losses get worse and then they come back here for a fare rise? Deputy Secretary. Now, if we have time, I want to invite certain bus companies to tell us about the situation. Challenges vary from one operator to the next. So if possible, I want to give them time to explain. But here, now operating environment aside, it's not just for bus operators, it's for public transport as a whole. Passenger numbers have fallen, and that becomes pressure on operation, on management and governance of companies. The Transport Department monitors bus operators. There is regular monitoring. I want to invite my TD colleague to tell us more. On monitoring operators, there are different ways for us to do that. We don't do that on a quarterly basis. We look at monthly returns instead. We also look at riders' feedback, look at complaints. We also investigate the situation to see where improvement is needed, and then we follow up right away. Can we invite Citybus to give us a response about the high accident rate?
Accident rate issue already earlier, Chairman, but I would like to make a point around the commercial model. Hong Kong is the last remaining commercial bus model in the world. Prior to COVID, only the UK was a commercial model. Today, the UK government subsidises every single fare by every single passenger trap by $30 because the operations are not sustainable post-COVID. And I think you have to reflect on the fact that all the franchise bus operators during COVID and since COVID are in an improving position, and we are still at the point of running a commercial service that doesn't require direct subsidy from the government. So when applying for fare increases, we are very minded. There is an impact on the customers, the consumer on the street, but we have to think long-term and strategically about not applying pressure to government funding to fund it and subsidise the model.
Okay, thank you. Chan Wing-yen Yuan.
Ms. Jovi Chen. Thank you. Citybus just told us we're not subsidizing bus operators, but that $2 scheme is effectively a subsidy, especially given there are people taking long-haul routes for short journeys. Buses making a profit or running losses are nothing new. Now, there was a time a certain operator pulled off a trick. Now, let's return to the FAA. We have this formula. That formula gives us 3.63%. So there's no justification for the fare rises asked for. KMB, New Lantau, 6.5%. Citybus, appalling, 9.5%. But let's look at lost trips and accident rates. Citybus is higher. KMB and New Lantau turned a profit last year. KMB got $92 million in profit. Now, leaving aside airport and North Lantau, Citybus saw a loss of $57 million. Citybus said we wouldn't be expecting a supermarket to sell canned food at a loss, but it didn't mention profit-making canned food. How come there's just one kind of canned food losing money while other kinds of canned food making money? Losing money and asking for a bigger fare rises. This shows people poor management, and now they're asking for a fair rise. So it's like rewarding students who are not doing well. So when the government looks at the fare rise increases, the lost trip rate and the accident rate should be taken into account. And we should have a penalty mechanism like what we have with the MTR Corporation. Deputy Secretary. The member mentioned subsidies for seniors. I will invite the bus operator to discuss this in a moment, especially with regard to their operation. So that's for the bus operator, KMB. Now, the $2 scheme for people aged 60 to 64. Indeed, that's good news for the bus operators because more people in that age group are taking public transport and buses benefit from that. In 2022, that scheme came out. There were 2 million people taking KMB, but that figure now is 1.7 million, so it's a 10% drop. We don't have data on the increase in people taking long-haul routes for short journeys, but overall, ridership has fallen by 10%. City Bus, please.
提問。
Thank you. Each operator is in a unique position. Citybus mainly covers Hong Kong Island. We have an aging and shrinking population. The railroad is expanding. Now, with the crossover section of the East Rail Line and then also the South Island Line, all that affects our ridership. Our ridership has fallen by 20% over 10 years. So that's unique to Citybus. I also want to point out another thing, and that was covered by Richard. And leaving aside the anti-epidemic fund, we had a loss of $310 million. And the recent loss was $57 million, so that was a sharp reduction in the loss. Now, time is tight, so we move on to Mr. Gary Zhang. We discuss the macro environment. Ridership has not risen sharply, but let's look at fuel costs, stable, and it has even fallen. Now, wages, it's roughly on a par with market rises, as members from trade unions have told us. The government also exempts tolls. Buses are not charging lower fares because of the toll exemption. And then we get a fare rise application way above inflation. People fail to see the reason for this. We have a fare rise application before us. I'm looking at the paper. We don't even see a basic breakdown. How do we make sense of that? How do we assess that? How much money are you making? How much money are you spending? In future papers on bus fare rise applications, we will need a basic breakdown, and then we will have something to go on, and then we can tell the weighting of the macro environment and the operation of each operator. Citybus told us about a loyalty program for riders. I think that's right. In Tuen Shui Wai North to Hong Kong Island, for example, Citybus has an edge. When you take the train, you have to change trains. Citybus offers a more straightforward way for people to get around town. This customer loyalty program will get more people to go for the bus instead of the rail. So can we also cover people who commute from Tien Shui Wai to Hong Kong Island under your customer loyalty program? Now, we want to encourage different people to take the bus. Some of them are struggling, say people with visual impairment. They can only take other transport options. So for the bus operators or the government, can we have facilities that make life easier for those with visual impairment so that those people take the bus more often? And that way, US will get more people taking the bus.
你想問
Do you want the government to answer your questions? Yes, the government first, as well as the bus operators. Thank you, Chairman. On the operation data, the bus operators actually gave an analysis on the data, including the rise of salary costs, etc. And all this information can serve as a reference for members. We'll see if we can conduct more analysis in the future. After listening to members' views today, we will make a more detailed assessment and analysis. We will also consult the TAC before submitting our recommendations. On bus facilities for the visually impaired or persons with disability, I understand that the bus operators have been improving in this regard. Perhaps we can ask the operators to tell you more. Yes, KMB. For wheelchair users, for all the new buses, we have double wheelchair seats for elderly people inside our buses. I'm asking for facilities for the visually impaired. In Shamshui-Po district, we have launched a trial in some 15 to 16 bus stops. We have talking bus stops to ensure that the visually impaired can take the right buses. We will roll out more of such services in the future. Other bus operators? Yes, Richard?
Focus on visually impaired and also hearing impaired individuals is massive now. In new bus technology, we're introducing visual screens set in the wheelchair bays. We also provide 2 wheelchair bays going forward. And our new mobile application next year will not just only have a visual display, but also a talking display for people in that category. In terms of that as well, we're also engaging with NGOs and charitable organisations that provide support to these user groups, both elderly and young people, and undertaking bus driver training where they actually are simulated to experience these things, so really upping the customer service.
好，林蘇偉議員。
Ms. Connie Lam? Many members have already talked about this. That is a drop of fuel costs around the world. We see that the bus operators have made hundreds of millions of dollars. However, they are still asking for a fair rise. As a geographical constituency sector's member, I feel angry for the public. I think the government is also responsible. I think we need user-friendly measures for the public. To give you an example, from Sai Kung, Changquan-O to border control points like Lintong and Shenzhen Bay, there is a lack of such services. I don't know if it is a problem on the part of bus operators or the government. Well, some members also mentioned about section fares. From Changquan-O to Chenshawan, KMB offers services. There are 2 section or 3 section fares. To ensure good public transport services, you have to ensure that you can take care of all these details. Well, a few days ago, there was a news that a wheelchair user encountered problems on the bus, and the bus captain did not offer help in terms of training for bus captains to take care of passengers with disabilities. What measures are there? I got complaints from people with disabilities that bus captains aren't friendly. We need friendly measures for people with disabilities. If you cannot roll out such measures, what position do you have to ask for fair increase? Yes, KMB, Ms. Kwan. Thank you. On taking care of people with disabilities. We've been working hard in this regard. As mentioned, in new buses, we have double wheelchair seats. We also have added handrails at wheelchair seats. In training for our bus captains, we have a comprehensive set of guidelines for our bus captains. If we find that our bus captains do not follow our guidelines when handling passengers with disabilities, we'll ask them to come back to the KMB Academy to continue to receive training. Now, I'm talking about the news report from a few days ago. Well, perhaps you wait for the bus operators to reply first. Yes, Ms. Kwan, please be succinct. Right, when we find that the bus captains do not follow the guidelines, we'll ask them to come back to the KMB College to receive training. Yes, City Bus?
Already answered the point on bus captain training. Actually, we've doubled the bus captain training since the middle of the COVID period, and really looking at the customer experience, and that includes dealing with users with disabilities, whether they're physical disabilities that can be seen or whether they're hidden disabilities, and that's actually a key area of focus. The other thing is that improvements in infrastructure need to be made, and that's a joint responsibility between the bus operators and the government, because infrastructure is actually key to people with disabilities. And I just want to touch on the fact that, you know, our focus is on growing our businesses, whether we do that through training, whether we do that through investment, and we're in a loss-making position, but we're still investing. You know, we're investing to make the business better and stronger in the future.
Okay, Yu Ba.
Thank you.
New Lantau.
Point, and we do have refresher training for all our drivers every so often, and disability awareness training is part of that, and we'll strengthen that, I think. I think it's very important that we give a very welcoming approach to these people with disabilities or mobility impairments as they come to our buses.
好，今日歡議員。
主席，頭先喺
Ms. Doreen Kong. Based on the discussions we had, I think we're kind of in a standstill. The discussion was tense. Well, we're discussing whether there should be a bus fare increase. I think we need to be sensible. In terms of the fare adjustment mechanism, I think we have to take into account public acceptability, affordability, as well as the bus operator's financial position. In Hong Kong, we want people to make investments, but at the same time, we have to ensure that these investors can have a reasonable rate of return. Otherwise, how can we draw investors to Hong Kong? I'm not saying that we should not consider public acceptability and affordability, though. Every year they're applying for fare increase, and we have heated debate on this. We have to look at the root cause of the problem. We see a continuous expansion of the railway system, and we see more fierce competitions between bus operators and the MTRC. We're also seeing a shift in people's commuting patterns. So bus operators might continue to suffer a loss because of these reasons. So bus operators may have to rationalize their bus routes and services. If we don't tackle the root of the problem, no one would want to run bus services in the future. If we continue to condemn bus operators, they may withdraw from their businesses. On the mechanism, currently our formula takes into account nominal wage index as well as the consumer price index. We are seeing fluctuations in terms of ridership now. Also, every year we're seeing changes in our public transport network. Will we consider making reference from practices of other places? For example, we can introduce capacity adjustment factors into the formula. Deputy Secretary. Thank you, Chairman. The current fare adjustment arrangement has been effective. Ms. Doreen Kong mentioned about changes in people's commuting patterns as well as ridership, and this is currently reflected in the formula because this affects revenue of bus operators. We take into account changes in bus operators' operating costs and revenue, and therefore the current formula has taken into account all these. Ms. Doreen Kong also mentioned about the expansion of the railway system. Well, Hong Kong is a highly populated and dense city. We have to continue to make good use of our railway resources. Our transport strategy does see the railway as a backbone. However, buses also serve a very important role. They are flexible and they can adjust their services based on people's needs. We talk to bus operators about rationalizing of bus routes and services to cater to people's needs as well as the changing commuting patterns. And we will continue to do this. Perhaps I'll have to extend the meeting for another 10 minutes. Yes, Mr. Gary Chen. Chairman, the fare increase that bus operators are asking for is appalling. Members asked about different proposals for raising revenue and cutting expenditure, and I hope bus operators would seriously consider these proposals. However, all these proposals cannot help mitigate the fare increase proposed. I think there is another solution we can opt for, that is the toll exemption fund. Why don't we make use of the fund to mitigate the fare increase? I see that there is about $450 million in the fund. We can make use of the fund so that the fare increase can be mitigated by a few percentage points. Can the government tell us why it's not making use of the fund? Deputy Secretary said the setting up of the fund is for stabilizing fare increase, and if need be, they would make use of the fund. We have some $450 million in the fund. Why don't you use it? Have you not heard the needs and demands of the public? I see that for some bus operators, they have a negative balance in the fund, but still, you can make use of the fund. We've been talking about power tariff increase. The power companies also make use of the stabilizing fund to keep the power tariffs down to 1% increase. How come there can be a negative balance for the power stabilizing fund, but not for the TEF? If you can make use of the fund, then you can keep the bus fare increase down. Deputy Secretary. Thank you, Chairman. Member is right that we do make use of the TEF to mitigate the effect of bus fare increase. Last year, when we dealt with the fare increase applications, we recommended the CE in Council to make use of the toll exemption fund to mitigate the bus fare increase. So we see that the TEF is playing an important role here. There could be a negative balance for the TEF. This is because we keep the exempted toll into the fund. However, there is also expenditure on the bus operator's part. They can withdraw money from the fund. If the withdrawal is the same as the money deposited, then there will be no positive growth in the fund. And then we won't be able to make use of the fund to mitigate the fare increase. However, in the future, say if there is a rise in ridership and that there is money going into the fund, we can stop the bus operators from withdrawing money from the fund to offset their expenditure. So we have such a mechanism in place to mitigate the effect of fare increase.
Chairman, the DS answered my second part of the question, but the first part went unanswered. That money is there. Are you simply looking for the interest income? That money won't go into the treasury. We will use the TEF. We use that at the last fare rise. This time, we look at the applications. If we see justifications for the fare rise, and then when we would put this proposal to the Chief Executive in Council, we will then include the TEF. Mrs. Regina Ip, I've been listening to members' remarks. Surface quality, accident rate, looking after the vulnerable, those points are valid. The concern about the extent of the fare rise is also valid. Of course, LegCo will make the final decision. But on the point about making a profit and raising fares, I take issue with those arguments. When a business cannot make profits, assuming it's not about poor management, that means it's bad in the community. Of course, we want businesses to gradually recover profitability. Now, my question for the bus operators is this. You're seeing gradually more riders. How will you increase the wages for your workers once you make a reasonable rate of return? Please also let your workers share in the benefits. So can we get a response from the three bus operators? We start with KMB. Over the COVID years, ridership fell. That was because of COVID. When you compare the pre-COVID and the post-COVID times, ridership has fallen by 9%. The main reason is the expansion of our rail network. That took many riders from buses. Now, for our staff, we offered reasonable pay rises. Now, with that wage, we have an easier time hiring workers on better paying conditions for workers who will do as much as we can. Now, what about the increase? Since 2017, the fare rise has been 23%. That's in terms of the wage increases for our staff. City Bus?
As mentioned, looking after our staff is key, and applying appropriate wage increases so we can not only recruit staff, but recruit good staff and also invest in their training. And critically, when we're doing that, we're looking at reciprocal spend within the economy. You know, between the franchise bus companies, we're employing almost 15,000 staff across all the franchise bus companies. And we have to think, you know, about maintaining a level of stability for them. We have to think about how we can recruit them, and we have to think about reciprocal spend in the economy. If we don't have enough staff, we can't operate our businesses, we can't grow our businesses, and we can't take our businesses forward and provide a vital public service.
What
about the increase in wages?
increase for your staff, the rate?
Yep, so similar situation during the COVID period. We worked with our staff and trade unions to suppress wage costs. But in 2022, as we started to emerge out of the first phase, we awarded 4.5%. In 2023, 4.3%, and this year, in 2024, 3.6%. So sharing with our staff the recovery is absolutely critical. We've also taken initiatives around accidents and complaints and attendance at work, where we have worked with the trade unions to share the benefits that we generate.
Okay, thank you. 跟住余巴。
多謝。
New Lantau Bus. Thank you. A brief response. So since the last fare rise, now our workers are mostly bus captains. Wage increase has been 8% since the last fare rise. Now for next year, we haven't started the discussion yet because it's in the middle of the year that we discuss wage increases. I believe bus operators will give good benefits to their workers. Hiring has been tough. So the wage increase at bus operators are actually bigger than the pay rise for legislators. Now, my term, nobody wants to run a loss-making business. It's important for companies offering a public service to manage their business as well. Workers want pay rises. Fair rise should be reasonable based on inflation. Reasonable fair rise is understandable. What matters is openness and transparency. We have seen fair rises. Last year, I've looked at KMB and New Lantau. Both operators are improving their position now, but I don't see any improvement for Citybus. In 2022, $30 million of losses. After fair rise, 2023, the loss was $57 million. There's something unusual, so I dug up old papers, old information. I looked at the parent company. The documents I've found showed me something that I would like to seek clarification. Every year, there's a $20 million consultancy fee plus $5 million in bonus. What is that? Given your business position and you're still paying a huge amount of consultant fee and bonus, and that's for other companies. Now, I've heard that some people who have been keeping an eye on bus operators say $450 million in cash dividends has been distributed to shareholders. So people get that impression. You pay dividends to shareholders, but the public is expected to pick up the bill. And then the operational figures don't look good. So people think one increase after another. So can we invite Citybus to tell us about your agreement with this company? And in this context, you're still giving out the dividend. So I'm talking about the deal with Temple Water. So over to Citybus.
Answering Chairman's question, all companies need to make money, and ultimate parent companies or holding companies also need to return a profit in respect of that. So that's an absolutely critical factor, and that drives future investment, it drives change, and it drives the evolution of a business. You know, we're not here today to talk about those specifics, but actually when you look at the structure of all franchise bus companies, they have holding companies and ultimate parent companies. In terms of the profitability thing, we have talked about it on a number of occasions, and we can see the improvement in reducing the loss position year on year when we remove the anti-epidemic subsidies. You know, as I noted earlier on, we've had a cost reduction of 5.2%, 23 to 22. That's $144 million. Last year, it's coming up about 4%. So every single year, we're making economies to offset increases in fares and ensure that we're realising capital for investment. But still, the base fare is too low to generate enough cash.
似乎咧，即係你都承認咗你哋。
So you acknowledge that you paid dividends to your shareholders. In terms of cutting expenses and raising revenue, that's something every company has to do. But some of the money is paid to shareholders, and now you're asking for a higher fare. You're asking for 9%. In 2021, it was 12%. And then the figures continue to show a loss from Citybus. People thought you were struggling, but at the same time, you paid dividends to shareholders. So people get ideas. So as you apply for the fare rise and when you decide on the dividends, please also consider people's feelings. On the one hand, you pay dividends. At the same time, you ask the public to foot the bill, and that's something people won't be happy with. And for the government, in terms of the consultancy agreements, bonuses for consultants, and also corporate governance, are they paying the consultants a huge amount? That will lead to sustained losses, and that shouldn't be normal. I hope the government can also find out about this too. So we have no other business. We will conclude the meeting here. Thank you.